Hello, warm greetings from the Academy of Korean Studies. I'm Claire Kim, your MC for today's lecture meeting. Since COVID-19 pandemic started, the Societas Koreana has still tried to offer meaningful lectures to deepen the understanding of the Korean studies through specially made lecture videos and interviews which are uploaded on YouTube already. Especially for this year's Societas Koreana lecture meeting, we have prepared the Zoom lecture meeting, which enables us to invite the attendees through a web conference. Now, let us start. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Professor Seok-Kyeong, who is from the Department of Communication at Seoul National University, and the title of her lecture is Hallyu, a new global cultural phenomenon for the 21st century. As the most renowned scholar regarding Korean wave or Hallyu, she achieved her doctoral degree in Information and Communication Sciences at the University of Grenoble III in France, and she was the professor in the University of Bordeaux in France from 2000 to 2013, and she joined the Seoul National University since 2013 up to now. Her major research and teaching interests include cultural studies, visual methods, and communication, media culture, and transnational and global popular culture. Also, Professor Hong has been writing many columns and books, which is called BTS on the Road, which was recently published in the market regarding BTS and many cultural issues. No further delay, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Hong to the stage.
It's a great pleasure to speak of Hallyu and its various aspects in the presence of this honorable audience. I've been teaching in university since 2000. As a researcher, I've been observing how the Hallyu phenomenon is being received in the world, especially in Asia and Europe for now more than 20 years. This position has allowed me to have a more general, comparative, and global view on Hallyu phenomenon. So many things have been told about Hallyu, this peculiar cultural phenomenon, which was recognized as such at the end of the 1990s. My aim is not to retrace the facts and events which constituted this phenomenon, but to introduce the audience to the cultural dynamics of Hallyu, focusing on the explanations and discourses it produced. Through the global success of BTS, Korean dramas, as well as Korean films, Hallyu continues to stimulate curiosity. After a brief definition of the Hallyu and the introduction of its social historical context, I'll explain the phenomenon through three phases according to the mediation process. The first phase will focus on the birth of Hallyu in East Asia, marked by the huge popularity of Korean dramas. It will be followed by a segment on the rise of K-pop as a global culture, thanks to internet and digital culture. After that, I'll focus on two recent and extreme cases of success, BTS and the rebirth of Korean dramas through Netflix. As you may know, the Korean wave rose to fame in the international media stage without any sign or preparation, and surprised many people, leading to various thoughts and beliefs concerning its causes, agencies, and effects. I'll also discuss some misconceptions that have recently piled up and prevailed in this field. They have caused some misunderstandings and contradictions that conflict with the reality of Hallyu in this rapidly transforming media environment. Korean songs becoming popular abroad was not a rare phenomenon, even prior to the rise of K-pop. From the man with a yellow shirt in the 1960s to the popularity of Korean singers in Japan in the 70s and 80s. However, the sudden popularity of K-dramas, Korean dramas, that simultaneously occurred in many Asian countries in the late 1990s in the early 2000s was an unexpected success, far beyond everyone's imagination. After the naming of the phenomenon by the Chinese media as Hallyu, the Korean wave, at the very beginning of the 2000s, Hallyu became understood and known as the successful spreading and reception of Korean popular culture abroad, as well as the additional phenomena brought by it. Since Hallyu became prominent, there have been attempts to link its success to changes in the domestic cultural industry and policies. For example, President Lee Myung-bak tried to promote Hansik, Korean food, and Hanbok, Korean traditional clothes, which led some media and scholars to consider this attempt as a turning point in Hallyu and name it as a key period to the development of the Hallyu we know today. However, considering that Hallyu is a phenomenon of cultural acceptance and reception abroad, it is more appropriate to understanding it based on changes in mediation and reception mechanism, not that of agency-driven propagation. To better understand the rise of Korean pop culture, we will have to take a brief look at Korean history. During the long period of military dictatorship, which spread from the 1960s to the 80s, Korean people continuously fought for democracy. Finally, through a massive civil movement and resistance, Korean society won the right to democracy, democratic election between 1987 and 89. In the year of 1988, Seoul hosted the Summer Olympic Games, which meant opening up the entire country to foreigners and reorganized the various infrastructures and systems to the global standards of the time. It was the real international debut of this young democracy. Democratization of the country liberated Korean people from the oppressive political, social, and cultural ambience of the past, leading to a new generation, expressing a sudden cultural thirst in the early 1990s. We witnessed the rise of new pop artists such as Seok-Kyeong, who revolutionarily transformed the cultural scene of South Korea. And as early as the mid-90s, the first generation of K-pop idol bands, which quickly earned the passionate support of young fandoms. Regardless of the IMF economic crisis that violently shook Korean society between 1997 and 2000, the Korean media industry rapidly grew during the 90s. In this political, economical, cultural context, and the continuous development of the media, Hallyu hit the East Asian media culture. The first phase consists of the rise of Hallyu in the East Asia around 2000 to 2010. During this period, Hallyu was initially a regional phenomenon, resulting in the trans-Asian commercial trade of TV program and in the East Asian broadcasting market, with the terrestrial and satellite broadcasting as intermediaries. As a result, the Korean wave provoked vivid reaction from each domestic media and audience. This period saw the huge success of some Korean dramas, like Winter Sonata, Autumn Tale, Jewel in the Palace, and Hallyu stars as well. K-dramas succeeded in obtaining a large popularity among viewers in different countries, of which each country showed different cultural dynamics of reception. Even if every country has different cultural dynamics regarding K-drama, in most countries, the majority of consumers are from the middle class. For them, K-dramas trigger their desire to consume content much more than Japanese content. For East Asian audiences, Japanese standards seemed too occidental and too advanced to catch up to, compared to the Korean equivalent, which for them was closer to their everyday reality and more reachable, especially reachable. The success of K-drama in East Asia is important because it contributed to the recognition of a common East Asian identity for the East Asian audience. By consuming K-dramas, East Asian people came to an agreement that they are sharing a unique feeling which only relates to the East Asian countries. Moreover, K-dramas show a Korean mix of tradition and modernity. Despite a rapid development, Korean Confucianist traditions survived in a sense and formed this hybrid culture. This uniqueness of Korean society became desirable for viewers of K-dramas especially. The international success of K-drama had also a visible and positive impact on Korean beauty, fashion, and tourism, and especially original soundtrack industries too. By using streaming services enabled by the rapidly developing internet, Hallyu quickly spread worldwide thanks to the active subtitling and sharing of its overgrowing audience. This time, it happened without any institutional mediation. It's also the period that East Asian cross-media productions met big success, as is the case of Boys Over Flowers, as you see that here. And the success of a drama was no more entirely depending on that of terrestrial diffusion. From that time, a drama could be a sensation online, while its domestic audience was just ordinary. Through the same mechanism of internet and digital culture came the rise of K-pop that then overflowed along with other Korean contents beyond East Asia this time. This is the cover of my book on the global K-drama fandom published in 2013. I took this photo, a wooden table in the playground of high school when I was professor in the University of Bordeaux back in 2009, I remember. I was invited for a lecture to a high school located in the center of Bordeaux city. What I found there is a big surprise. It was a mix of Japanese kawaii signs and K-pop idols group's name. At the time, I couldn't even recognize all of the K-pop idol groups' names, but I felt immediately that something important was happening. This experience shocked me and made me start my research on Hallyu and its consumption out of East Asia, especially Western Europe and North America. One of my major arguments in this book is the importance of East Asian popular culture as a context. For example, Japanese pop culture played an important role in the transcultural propagation of K-pop culture into the West. Japanese pop culture through manga built an intercultural highway, and Korean content used this bridge massively and successfully. In the future, we will see another East Asian cultural flow spread through that intercultural highway, this time made even more efficient by the Hallyu phenomenon. In this diagram, the largest gear, globalization digital culture, is a moving power for the whole structure. With the globalization and digital culture, cultural contents are no longer restricted to a certain part of a territory. They can easily be conveyed in digital forms. So every cultural content that is made digital has a potential to become transnationally recognized. It is thanks to this infrastructure that Hallyu contents were able to be recognized in other parts of the world. Especially South Korea is heavily networked and had high-speed internet services earlier than most part of the world. This environment positively influenced the transnational flow of Korean pop culture beyond Asia. The circulation of K-pop contents K-pop contents is based on an infrastructure that digital revolution brought to global fandom culture. It is highly related to the globalization of American television series and their transnational transmedial products, as well as the East Asian convergence culture, which was largely based on Japanese manga and animation. Western consumers of K-pop, already having the experience of a global fandom through American pop culture, already know what they should do as a global K-pop listener. The infrastructure made it easier for them to react with K-pop content. And that is the case of ARMY, for example, BTS's global fandom. They knew how to react to BTS's universe, a kind of transmedia story, for example. However, another factor that matters is high-speed internet. In accordance with the development of internet technology, now a massive circulation of contents can take place without mediation of traditional legacy media. Now, fandoms are more actively engaged, and they are eager to participate, sharing with others what they found. This shows that internet now works as a new cultural sphere of global population. K-pop has taken a lot of advantage of this new phenomenon. The Korean music industry took advantage of this free circulation strategy too. Its copyright system is way different than the Western one, but it doesn't mean that all is free. The Korean music industry uses free YouTube videos and SNS as a big promotions and make huge profits selling CDs and concerts and tie-in products, merchandising products. As such, the cultural sphere is shifting from legacy media to digital media. In the age of digital media, the know-how of new digital narratives become the new norm. Therefore, traditional way of cultural heritage does not work anymore. And in such condition, huge gaps are created between digital natives and prior generations. Moreover, after the 90s, when boy bands or girl groups disappeared from the Western music scene, it was hard to find alternatives of band culture in America and European pop culture. In this situation, K-pop, which appropriated a hip-hop culture from North American pop culture, had successfully given it a new meaning and authenticity. It had become an alternative for the youth all over the world. Another important element of globalization of K-pop is the uniqueness of Korean fandom culture. It gives a strong sense of belonging to the youth. Major fan neighbor of Korean fandoms from a community built through translations, digital creativity like diverse form of fan products, and supporting activities for their preferred group and idol members. A particular feature of K-pop fandoms is the tie between fans and their idols, as well as the relationship between fans. Through kind and live SNS, fans can feel a strong sense of belonging to this fan community that they could not find anywhere else. Global K-pop fandoms take this as a model and make a global fraternity of fan communities, as we can observe through ARMY, BTS's global fandom community. Then you might ask, why does it have to be idols when there are so many kinds of celebrities? To understand this, we should first have a look at the East Asian convergence culture. K-pop culture well demonstrates how the East Asian convergence culture works, and it can be shown in this diagram. East Asian convergence culture is made of cross-media practices between music industry, dramas, mangas, novels, webtoons, games, celebrity, etc., etc. In the cultural industry, all of these industries come together to form kind of cross-media practices. Special entertainment culture helps these cross-media practices, providing idols entertainment worker. Media mix implies the ability to bring fictional fantasy to the everyday life, as is the case of, for example, original soundtrack music, which prolongs a drama's fictional world during one's common commute time, for example. Idols play an important role as entertainment workers in East Asian convergence culture. First, they play the role of talents, an archetype of East Asian entertainment workers, born first in the Japanese television system. They are multi-talented spectacle men and women, as is the case of idols, who this time are educated and trained to become multi-talented. Some of them become stars, and majority of them remain media celebrity. Throughout every activity, each idol gathered their own story, character, and discourse. By doing this, they maintained the industry dynamic and efficient. Overall, the most important thing that K-pop produced in the global culture space is the fact that it starts discourses on identities. It provides different visions on race and gender divide in the world. When it comes to consumption, it makes K-pop contents more friendly to conservative. It makes K-pop contents more friendly to conservative Western middle classes. Until now, it has not been shown any aesthetical, ethical, for example, no drugs and little violence and sexualization, and neither political danger. So it is relatively safe to consume. K-pop is attractive to multicultural youths too, because it provides materials for diverse identity construction. Glamorous K-pop stars show different kinds of relationship between members in a same group, as well as different beauty standards for men. They are offering a new type of masculinity that Hollywood has never produced. K-pop fandom culture is considered a friendly, gender diverse community too. The powerful influence of K-pop stars is making Asian people feel empowered, which is a very important point here. The success of BTS, which has held the number one spot in the Billboard for I remember 15 weeks in this 15 weeks this year, has been the subject of numerous questions. What makes BTS different from other K-pop groups? In a neoliberal world, in the midst of a crisis of class decline and constant self-development and competitions, BTS gave depressed young people the reason and strength to break free from self-hatred and to learn how to love themselves, as their album says. In addition, in the reality that the primary group has been disbanding, primary group in the society has been disbanding, like family and the community members, BTS provides to their fandom a new sense of inclusivity and safety. To summarize, BTS as a group is successful because they spread social cultural values and messages along with quality music and performance. BTS has become recognized individuals that preach universal messages and values. They spoke on behalf of the youth in front of the United Nations. During the pandemic, BTS and K-pop grew further through online concerts. BTS produced music aiming to comfort the world during the pandemic too. Permission to Dance, their last song, is a good example. Its music video includes all people, including minorities and disabled people. Netflix is changing the way Korean film and television dramas are globalized. They first launched their streaming service to United States in 2007 and to Koreans in 2016. Netflix actively purchased the Korean program that proved to be a content powerhouse in East Asia and started introducing original Korean Netflix program starting 2018. With the growth of Netflix during the pandemic, Korean movies and television dramas have successfully been received all over the world. In 2020, so last year, Korean content occupied third place in the palmarès of Netflix top-ranked daily world audience after the United States and the UK programs. Especially in Asia, during the pandemic, Korean dramas such as Crash Landing on You and Itaewon Class and Psycho, But It's Okay, overall huge success all over the East Asian countries. In even Asian countries, all over the Asian countries. Interviews with viewers around the world who watch Korean dramas through Netflix let us know these opinions. Korea is a safety country, especially during the pandemic. It's a country which has cities with beautiful parks and nature, a country with a dynamic urban space and value of diversity, a country with romance that respects each other's feelings, a country where young people are still polite to the elders. The current state achieved by Korean society is considered as a result of political and socio-cultural struggles. Viewers of K-dramas through Netflix are building the perception of Korea as an open society that produces inclusive content rarely seen in other East Asian countries. They are also cultivating historical and political curiosity about Korea and providing an opportunity to reflect on the relationship between Korea and their own country. Finally, they think that the Korean drama's quality has improved and that they showcase a unique aesthetic. BTS and Netflix's cases show us that Korean popular culture has developed to become a culture with universal values and recognized and approved by global fan and world audience. Therefore, some misconceptions on Hallyu continue to exist, and they are producing partial judgments. It is a well-documented fact that the Korean wave is not a propagation, but a reception phenomenon. That is, Hallyu is a phenomenon caused by a combination of factors such as quality growth of Korean popular culture and the digital media environment, and not the result of an intentional propagation. Soft power, or cultural attraction, is a power based on a voluntary agreement that cannot be made intentionally. Like interpersonal attraction, maintaining and promoting this is a tricky and difficult task. Korea, which has not completely escaped from the image of a developing country in the past, due to its rapid economic growth under a state governance, tried to utilize and emphasize popular culture in government's efforts to improve its image. The abolition of various cultural censorship in the 1990s and the recognition of the importance of the cultural industry were the result of Korea's democratization in the 1980s, as I mentioned above. These changes forward an open society led to more active cultural policies than in the past. As I mentioned, Hallyu was not the result of a government policy, but the government's efforts to support the Korean wave after its outbreak made the foreign elites, intermediaries, consider Hallyu a result of the governmental export support policy, not as an organic result of cultural ability. This is an attitude especially found in the media in Europe and North America, and can be called colonial mindsets, I'd like to say. This attitude is also found in elite mediation in other regions who internalized this colonial attitude. This colonial attitude can be witnessed especially in the way K-pop's achievements are constantly questioned and through the criticism of especially idol culture. Many aspects of Korean culture are no more reserved to Koreans, especially in K-pop. K-pop groups made up of pure foreigners have already been formed in Japan, in United Kingdom, and United States, and Vietnam, and even in Philippines. I'll show you their photos. For example, the idol group SB19, created in the Philippines by a Korean planner, surprised the world by being nominated for Billboard Social Artist in a short time, which was possible in a very K-pop-like way through an ardent and organized fandoms supporting using social media as an example. When the actual K-content changes in the way how to logically and reasonably adapt this trend to the politics of national image of Korea, it will become a complex issue for Korean public diplomacy. Now is the time to break away from the fixed status of Hallyu as a Korean-produced content in South Korea, for example, and take a broader view on the universality of the historical, social, and cultural experiences and values created by the Korean nation state and civil society. Recession studies shows us that Korea has a universal value and meanings that Hallyu embodies and transport abroad, as I mentioned before, above, relating to Netflix. Yeah, let's come to the last part of the presentation. For a long time, it has been said that Hallyu is supported by the nostalgic middle-aged women alienated from the male-dominated culture of the country. The passionate fandom of young women toward Korean idol stars, or the population with a gender minority or racial identity. However, Korean popular culture showed the formation of a strong fandom through phase 1 and 2. It is now phase 3, through the global success of BTS and K-pop, and their Korean programs on Netflix. Its audience is no longer composed of women, young people, or minorities, but a larger spectrum of people. That includes, of course, all ages, ethnicities, and genders. Yeah, let's conclude. The phenomenon of transnational popularity of Korean pop culture can be explained as a result of the democratization of the Korean society, which made people express themselves. A competitive media culture has developed in order to please the diverse public taste at that time. Hallyu was also possible thanks to the globalization and the digital culture, East Asian convergence culture, as well as the formation of the global youth culture. The pandemic has increased the consumption of media culture, and the Hallyu has been recognized for its value. This goes beyond simple cultural and industrial interests, or even foreign policy gains. It shows that Korean popular culture is being received and acknowledged as a global popular culture. I also underlined that the cultural consequences of Hallyu are numerous. It is transforming gender and racial norms, and Korean stars like BTS have become messenger for the youth in the world. In order to enhance Korean soft power, I think it's time to consider this changed status of Korea and the present state of Hallyu. It needs to adopt more comprehensive, sensitive, bilateral, and more value-oriented policies. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor, for your inspirational speech and lecture. I think today's lecture title and the content is more intriguing and interested one that among the other attendees. So now we're going to open question and answer session. What do you think of challenges or limits of Hallyu in the era of diversity, especially ethnicity, racial, and gender issues?
I think 2 points. In terms of gender, idol culture of boys bands is giving very inclusive practices through their inclusive practices, kind of register of raw materials for every gender, even minor minorities, gender identities, produce produce expressions of their identities through using the different kind of expressions made by the idols in their everyday practice of their performance in even everyday life showed through SNS. So it's very it's a big challenge because the world is dominated by the white male dominance that we call dominant masculinity. So during my interviews with foreign fans, I knew that men and women, or even not cisgender identities, feel themselves very free and free to be a fan to a group, idol group of K-pop. So in gender dimension, I think that Korean pop culture is very challenging for the dominant global pop culture. But in a racial dimension, it's very clear that out of Asia, Korean pop culture are empowering Asian people. Yeah, it's true. But in interior of Asia, especially in East Asia, there are a kind of danger. I think that the Korean pop culture is reproducing a kind of hierarchy, racial hierarchy based on K-beauty, based on skin colorism, for example, whitening practice, etc. So I think it's a real danger because so many in East Asia through this passion for Korean beauty and enormous popularity of Korean celebrities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And from Russia, Atami, she said, hopefully she is right. How do you see the future of Hallyu?
Future of Hallyu? This is a very good, very big question. I think it will. It's a question. Yeah, very often question made for me. I think if it is the question on how long it will, continue to be effect like this, I think Hallyu as the very passionate phenomenon in East Asia can be less powerful, but I think it will continue to influence the global pop culture, producing Korean stories and K-pop performances, very specific K-pop performance, etc. So I think I'm very positive for the future of Korean culture.
Yes,
Hallyu, in the world.
Yes, I'm also very positive, very confident that Hallyu will be lasting for at least 2 decades, right? Thank you. And Madame Tasker also asked us, thank you very much for the interesting lecture. Do you have a published book in English?
Oh, yes, I have one book, it's edited book on East Asian convergence culture. It's published this year, the end of the March. So very new book. But in my book on BTS, so the English title is BTS on the Road, is translated into Japanese, and it will be published. It will be published in Vietnamese and Indonesians, but not yet English publication.
Wow.
I found, because I want this book is published by the big popular publications, so not university or academic publication. So it will take time, but I hope in the near future that we have translation of this book in English.
Yes, I think many of us are really interested in BTS on the Road in the English version, and she is seeking out the best partner for her next step. So please, little bit more be patient about BTS on the Road. Okay, thank you, Madame Tazigo. I will be saying the Olga Fedorova Turova. Thanks for the lecture. You said that Hallyu stimulates the development of talents in youth, mostly positive points of representations. Given the conditions in which singers work, is it acceptable to promote such a thing?
You know that all representation is not real. It's just a representation. What is important is the value that the representation try to propagate, and especially it's the reception that the meaning is produced. Meaning is produced during the reception. It's not just it's not just a text which produce the meaning. So that's why that even same dramas, films are received in a different way in one country or another. You know, that's why the Winter Sonata was popular in Japan, and During the Palace was in another countries. So as you said, that the image of Korea in dramas are not real, but it takes some elements taken from the reality. So when we watch in a time, so the history of a drama, when we study the history of dramas, we can analyze that the dynamics that the drama's representation of Korean society and the reality. We can see these dynamics, and we can read the meaning of that representations in these dynamics. So, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, maybe she will be asking more, but I think that's why we are watching TV shows and drama, because it's fantasy, not just a reality.
Yeah.
So I think we all worth to be living in fantasy K-pop or K-wave. So she answered that the acceptance and then the meanings and the kind of it depends on the receivers in a title. So you can say like that. All right, so we're moving on to the next questions. Mr. Munira Sharifi. Yes, thank you very much for so fruitful lecture. 대장금, also known as a jewel in the palace historical drama, is very famous in my country. In recent years, Korean music and films have been gaining more popularity among young people. All right, sure, he is giving us great news in his country. So thank you. And then this is from Sierra Leone, Michaela Boni. What is the most unrealistic thing that happens in all Korean dramas?
All the Korean dramas?
Yes.
Unrealistic thing?
Yes. That's very funny question.
Time sleep.
Oh, time sleep.
Yeah. It's just fantasy.
Right.
Yeah. And the historical drama, the representation of historical drama is not only the question of a Korean production. It's the question of all the productions, because no one have ever lived in that period. So it is designed. The ambience and even clothes and palaces all are designed. To create the ambience of that drama. That's why it is so different. For example, palace in Kingdom and the palace of Korean traditional. So palace stories, power struggles in the royal families, for example. In Korean television dramas. So crazy thing these days is a time sleep. So the person, the character of our days, this time go sleep in 13th century, 15th century, and it creates the very peculiar and funny stories at that time. The 15th century or 13th century.
Yes, I
Yeah.
clearly remember one of the K-drama, I don't remember the title exactly, but it was sweeping from the Joseon dynasty and to the modern society,
yes.
and then she and he was a doctor at the modern, and
Yeah.
at that time, that was the also their kind of, it was reincarnation, something in that.
No, it's not. It's just a storytelling technique to make the story more playful and
That was very interesting.
amusement.
Yes, and then we are more likable to relate with the characters
course,
because they are living in the modern society as well, and they also goes
but
back.
it makes big problem for production because they, in this case they cannot have many PPL placement of products.
Right.
In 15th century, 16th century of Joseon
totally.
dynasty, we cannot we cannot show include the products images.
Yes, so she got a point. Yes. Okay, we're moving on to Russia. Tommy, Hallyu seems to be exporting a very specific Korean culture. Do you think it has become its own culture that starts to influence the culture it came from? For example, modernization, liberal views, etc. And then the country she or he was said that suddenly the K wave has become so popular. It was Tajikistan, I think. And then the last question from the Russia, Tommy.
Yeah, first of all, it is one of the main points of my presentation that is that we never produced the Korean dramas to export. Yeah, that's why it was big surprise when the foreign media talked about Hallyu, and especially in Chinese media, name it Hallyu. We have to understand it differently this way these days. First, the person who made this question, considering these days, he or she thought that we produced something, the Korean dramas and K-pop for exploitation, but it's not the case. The Korean drama is received as that by foreign countries, but we never produced it for exploitation. K-pop is a little bit different because there were times that, for example, JYP, with Wonder Girls, JYP tried to export Wonder Girls in United States, but it was a failure. Yeah, this project was a failure, but. These days Korean K-pop and BTS is so popular abroad. It is the power of fandom cultures. It's not Korean media who try to export the K-pop abroad. So this is the main point of my presentation. It's a reception phenomenon. It's not the propagation or exploitation phenomenon.
All right. I totally agree with her because especially K-drama and K-movies, they never intentionally made for exporting or propaganda purpose. It's just made naturally, just for the.
That's why the contents, Korean popular culture's contents have many things from Korean society because it was produced to please Korean people. So in terms of sensibilities and the interpersonal relationships and the way we react to elders and between lovers, there are very Korean things in it. Yeah, I have to say, because it was produced to please Korean audience, not foreign audience. We are living in a big period of public diplomacy, but what this the last point I made. We have to change the diplomacy, the policy, diplomatic policy. I think because Korean governments try to help after the outbreak of the Hallyu. Korean government naturally try to help this industry. But in trying to do that, it can be seen by foreigners, foreign elites, that Korean government try to export the Korean content, and the Hallyu is the result of these governmental policies. That's not the case. Yeah, I continue to say that that's not the policy. We never produced the content to export. But Korean government, after the outbreak, it's very natural that government try to help the exportation or, but there's all governments of the world are doing the same thing. Yeah, for example, French government, Japanese government help to export the propagation of that their films and their cultural products, not only popular culture but cultural products. So this very natural thing that governments try to do that, but Hallyu is not the result of that.
All right.
So it's clear.
All right. That's very insightful answer. Thank you, Professor. And from Ms. Olga, that will be the last question for all of us. Aren't there too much sexiness and promotion of fixed beauty standards in Hallyu? And also, what is your favorite group?
Beauty standards, yes, I think, yeah. I'm doing research on K-beauty these days. What is the influence of real influence in Asia? We talk about K-beauty, Korean beauty very much in terms of production and in the industry and aesthetics, and nobody knows that what it is exactly. We know that it's based on whitening of the skin whitening.
Color,
Yeah,
yes.
skin whitening. It's not just the question of color, but the preparation of the skin to receive the cosmetics on it. So it's a very complicated question, but I agree with you that there are beauty standards, but no one knows what is exactly these beauty standards. This is a very complex process.
Yes,
And,
she also
yeah.
mentioned about the plastic surgery.
But that's why I said
Yeah.
that the danger is that this kind of practices. So many people want to take 담다는 게 뭐죠? Resemble Korean celebrities. So the danger is that it reproduced kind of hierarchy, beauty hierarchy, and it's not just the beauty hierarchy, but it can be the racial hierarchy. This is the danger. This kind of question of beauty standards, and especially when it is based on skin.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very dangerous thing.
Yes, I feel sorry about the limits of beauty standards in K-wave Hallyu. And then, as far as I know, our professor's favorite group is BTS. He is also a fan of ARMY. Yes.
There are so many groups. There are misunderstandings of K-pop thing is that they are famous because they are very good looking person, but it's not true. It's their performance. Yeah. In this world, in these days, that in Korea, in K-pop scene, we can find so many talented people. I don't know exactly how many, but there are so many talented people. They can not just to dance and sing. They compose, they write, they can speak, they can play too. So my favorite group, BTS, but there are so many other groups. Red Velvet, Stray Kids, etc., etc. Fourth generation K-pop groups are very good.
Right. And I'm happy to wrap up our lecture with another ARMY's question.
Okay.
She's from Czech Embassy, Alaska. She asked, thank you for a great lecture. What do you think that makes BTS different and why and any other group and was not able to follow their success in such a scale yet? I'm an ARMY, by the way.
Yeah, okay. I mentioned it briefly in my presentation that the big difference that BTS have made is that they become subject individuals who can produce messages. They are subject of messages. Up to now, the individuals who can speak, who can propagate their ideas, were white people. It were. They were white people. But when we saw BTS talk about, for the sake of all youth, all mankind, why not? In front of UN, we are very moved because we don't have many examples. The colored people or Asian people, especially Asian people, have this kind of possibility to talk their messages in front of all of the world. So this is the big difference. And they can successfully create their world with these messages and values.
Right. All right. I hope everyone could ask your own question, and I'm so happy for
There
your
are so many questions.
passionate interest and presence and enthusiasm for the question and answer session. And our timing is up, and this is the end of the 87th Societas Korean Lecture Zoom meeting. And don't be sad, the next Societas meeting will resume in a week, next Thursday, 19th August. I really hope that I can meet you next week, everyone, no exception. All right, thank you very much for your time and cooperation. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.